right. So we are at the end, right, of our marriage series. So if you haven't been here, that's fine. Like, it's not like you need the last 2 weeks to make this week make sense. But the weirdest, so if you've been coming, though, the whole time, like all the way back since we launched in June, there's not been a lot of scripture. So I'm really looking forward to next week when we start to get back into this series, which is going to be really exciting as we journey to the cross, all right? So we're going to walk through the entire Gospel of John, I believe, until we get to the cross, all right? So I'm really looking forward to that. Who's ever driven through Amish country? Or ridden, you live in Amish country. So when you pass, do you remember when you pass the horse and buggies, right? What do you notice? Where are my teenagers at? You guys focus? Yeah. What do you see on the horses? Blinders, right? You get blinders. And so what's the idea there? The idea is that when maniacs and Mustangs just go 90 mile an hour past a horse and buggy, the horse isn't aware of it because the horse is what? Focused on what only it can see. And so it's found a way, not the horse, but its owner, right, has found a way to block the distractions so that the mission can be accomplished, okay? And so there's a passage in Proverbs chapter 29, verse 18. This is actually use the King James Version. It says this: where there is no vision, the people perish. Where there is no vision, the people perish. The idea of vision, right, is we need something to aim at, as a people. We need something to aim at. We're actually always aiming at something, whether we want to or not. But when we focus on something, we're more likely to get it done, right? I mean, that's pretty obvious. Anybody, maybe you're at work and you have to get your TPS reports in or whatever it is you file, right? You got to get those things in, and it's Friday, and as soon as you get it in, you can leave, right? It's how fast does that get done, right? That gets done so fast. I had a boss one time, he used to tell me, he was usually lying, but he's told me, hey, as soon as we get this job done, you can go home, paid for 8 hours. You can go home. And then when I would get it done, he'd be like, never mind. We got to go do something else. But he knew, right? He knew the idea of focus, right? Focus allows us to really accomplish the tasks in front of us. And so as it works in church, and it works in our own marriage relationships, which is what we're talking about today. But in church, we have to have a singular vision as a church, right? And that's why remember, if you were here for June, July, August, we just talked about who we were going to be, right? That was it. It was this is who we are, this is who we are about. We're about Jesus, we're about those that are on the margins of life. Those are the things. So it's this singular vision, because I don't know if I'm sure this church has never had division or lack of vision, right? Never, right? Other churches, let's talk about other churches. When you don't have a vision, what happens is whatever the most, charismatic person wants to do, they just start to follow that person. And you start to get all these different things. And listen, nothing gets accomplished, right? And no one feels on the same page. And so, as far as the church goes here, Pastor Robin and I get together almost every Monday, right? And so what you can guarantee happens is anything you've brought to me, good, bad, ugly, I go to her with it. And every week, we get together and we go over the vision of the church. Who are we supposed to be? And we have to always do that. We have to always come together on a regular basis to make sure that the vision of the church keeps moving the way that she sees that we're supposed to be going. All right? And so the same thing, that same kind of concept works also within our marriages. Because what happens when we aren't focused and we don't have a clear vision, this was interesting to me. Vision and division have nothing in common, those two words. You would think, but if you don't have vision, you do have division. Are you with me? Are you tracking? So you're going to be going in two separate directions if you're not constantly coming back together. And when you're dating in your relationship, this is actually pretty easy concept. We actually do it almost naturally, right? Because I'm trying to figure, if you're dating, it's like I'm trying to figure out, are you someone that I could marry? Then it's, are you someone that I would marry, right? And it's, are you someone I want to marry, right? Those are kind of three, and you're not actually doing that out loud in your head. If you are, that's weird, all right? But I'm just saying. But it's kind of happening. You're filtering, when you're in relationship, you're filtering in, you're taking it all in, trying to figure out. But because you're constantly coming together and you have a solid vision, you don't even know it, right? That's kind of where that begins to go. But what happens after you get married? What's the phrase that not everyone, but a lot of folks would use especially when they're talking about maybe past relationships that have ended? They're just trying to be nice. They say, well, that works. We grew apart. We grew apart, right? You did. Like, that's actually what happened. You did grow apart, and it does happen. And so one of the things that we've got to do in our relationships is figure out, how do we continue to come back together so that we can grow together? Because listen, you have kids, you have life circumstances, you lose someone important to you. Like, it changes you. You will change. Especially, I got married the first time at 18. I'm not 18 anymore. I'm a very different person, right? We're all very different people, and we're growing and we're growing and we're growing, and life happens. And if we're not connected, it's so easy, right? It's so easy to just keep moving. And it's just put your head down. Just put your head down. Get through this day, or get through this week. Then it's get through this month. And you never reconnect, and you're never coming back together. And yeah, that's what's going to happen. You're just going to grow apart if you don't have a plan. All right, and so the question today is, what can we do to keep from growing apart? And if there's anyone that's able to get me a small glass of water, that would be awesome. John's got it. He's awesome. Matthew 19, all right, verse 4. Haven't you read, he replied, that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become... Say it more convincing. One, right? One flesh. So that they are no longer two, but one flesh. And so it's like, how do we make sure that oneness, right? How do we make sure the oneness is something that we are able to maintain? You are my rock. So I have, so the series has been, I hope the series has been and continues through today to be applicable and practical. All right, that's really what my hope is. And so what I have today is a lot of questions, because we've really said over the last 3 weeks, communication, right? Communication is so huge, and talking about what's going on. And so I have a lot of questions that you can have, that you can write down, you can use, but I'm going to go through them fast, right? And so if you need to go back, all this stuff is still on our app. If you don't have our app yet, Scott, we can get the app. Everyone get the app now, right? Yeah, so you can download the app. All the messages and all kinds of stuff are on the app, all right? So this is called 10, 10, 10, 10, all right? 10, 10, 10, 10. So, and this is something that we can do, because what we're going to have to do is find a way and make time to get together, all right? Because you probably need 90 minutes a week. Not at once, but you probably need about 90 minutes to really make sure that you're on the same page. And so the first one is, this is dangerous up here, y'all. The first one is, look at the next 10 days together, right? It's like on a regular basis, you have to be looking at what do the next 10 days look like? Like, are we overstretched anywhere, right? And this is just where you communicate basic stuff. Like, we're talking, like, we at our home talk a lot about eating. We love food, all right? It's like, well, who's going to eat? Who's going to cook what? Who's going to do this? These are just kind of basic conversations that can come naturally if you're communicating on a regular basis. They can come naturally, but if you're not doing this, it's very easy to just be stressed out about what all that's going on. And I know, hey, this is how we kind of do it. It's like, I know I usually take care of X, but this week, I can't do X, right? I need you to handle X, but I can still do Y and Z, right? It's that kind of thing. And so these little basic things, and we talked about it in week 1, where we go, hey, what can I do for you today that would make your day easier, right? So it kind of falls in line with that whole concept there. What else is there? Can we make sure, can we squeeze in a date night somewhere? How can we fit that in? Can we get together sometime? Can we make sure that our bedroom doesn't have kids sleeping in it maybe once or twice this week? You know what I mean? Like those types of conversations are things that we can talk about, we have to have, but we can plan them, all right? But what it does is it makes sure that we're on the same page, all right? And again, it's always going to come back to how do we get on the same page so that we can have a unified vision for our marriages and our relationships. And the reason this helps, I think, and this is why it helps me, is that when Ashley and I talk about, and Ashley's flying back from Miami today, so she's like, after last week's message, I'm going to Miami. No, God bless her. I was like, yeah, you do what you got to do. When we talk about what's going on the next 10 days, when we do the 10-day thing, I become aware of what is bogging her down, right? I become aware of what is stressing her out, right? Because what can happen when we're growing apart, we're not communicating. And so to me, I'm the one carrying the burden. And she's got the nice job, and I'm the one this, and she's got this. Well, and I'm the one doing that. Like that's how that kind of works. And so if you're not sitting down where she go, man, these people at work, that I'm in charge of, like those, and now I can kind of bear some of that weight, and I'm not just taking it all on myself, right? So it's that little bit of communication. Now, let's talk about date night. Has anyone ever been told you need a date night? Have you ever heard that? Right, okay. That's pretty standard. I grew up, or not grew up, but in the first kind of 10 years of my ministry in preaching, I tell people, you need a date night. You need a date night, and it needs to be this, and you need to not talk about these things, and right, it was kind of I had this kind of very stringent idea of what a date night would be, but it is not a magical cure, okay? Because listen, here's what I've experienced before, especially when you're in a tough spot, to go, okay, you wanted a date night, and you wanted to talk, say something, right? It's like, oh, okay. Like that's not help. Like you're not like that's not something that's gonna work, right? And so I tell people, if you want to talk about your kids, you should like talk about what's going on. Like you're just there to talk. You're just there to get together and connect and discuss the future. And so the second one, and date nights are a great place to go into the second one. The other 2 10s are 10 weeks, 10 months. Right, this is not a super complicated system I've come up with, all right? 10 weeks, 10 months. What's going on in the next 10 weeks? Like, what does life look like? What does spring look like? What are our plans? What role do each of us have in that? Like, baseball season's coming up. Like, what obstacles did we run into last year, that we can get ahead of this year? Why did we have so many arguments last year around this thing that's coming up? Right, it's some of those things. What are we planning for spring break? That kind of thing. And then 10 months is, what do you wish you could accomplish as a couple? Right? What is something, and this is really a good question. If 10 months from now, X, Y, or Z didn't happen, how upset would you be? Right? There's some things in our lives, like there's some things that I want to do. It's like, how many times should I drive, would I be upset if I didn't see my parents 10 times, 5 times? This seems basic, but it's strategy, right? Because if you don't make a plan, it's like very easy to be like, well, I'll do it next week. I'll do it next week. I'll do it next week. And then you're like, I got 3 weeks left, or I got 1 month left. And so it just happens when we sit down and we talk to each other and be intentional about why we're talking to each other. And then the last one, can you guess? The last 10? Yes, 10 years, right? Super complicated. Do you like where you are in your career? You can change your career in 10 years. You have a whole new one. I'm 7 years into a whole new one, right? I started over at 30, 36. It's not 7 years, but my math's not great, okay? It doesn't take, you can do that, you know what I mean? But you have to talk about it, you know, and your partner has to have your back in those things, right? So it has to be negotiated between the two of you so that you're on the same page, looking at the same thing, going to the same place. Do you want to retire? Can we retire? You know, those types of questions. What does being a grandparent look like? You know, what does being a great-grandparent look like? Those, like, are we talking about these things, or are we just letting them happen, right? So, and here's the thing. As soon as you get all that stuff figured out, it'll change, right? Because how many of us sitting here 10 years ago would say, yeah, this is exactly how I planned it. Brian's got knocked down. He's got it knocked out. It's going to change. Like, you're not going to be exactly where you were. You're not going to be exactly who you think you're going to be in 10 years, and you're going to fail on some things, and you're going to do great on other things. The idea is that you're just coming back together on it, that the vision changes. I mean, even, you know, with the church stuff, it's like if me and Rob come together, it's like, okay, well, this was working, and now I think things are changing. Okay, well, let's shift that. Like, let's change that. It's not what we thought it was going to be. Like, well, we changed the service time up there from 15 minutes, like, twice in, like, 4 months. You know what I mean? Like that's just changing things. Like, that you need to do that because it works. You know, and it's like it wasn't what we thought. It wasn't what we thought it was going to be, but it is what it is. So now what do? We just make sure we're on the same page with whatever it is going forward. Okay? That's my 10, 10, 10, 10. All right? Next is, did anyone grow up with a very traditional roles for parents? Did your parents have kind of the traditional roles? Anybody? Okay, yeah. I did not. I grew up, my grandmother moved from France during World War II. She with my grandfather, and she got a job. She learned the language, got a job, become a citizen, and retired from Kmart. All right? That's my grandma. My mom worked until the day she died. All of her sisters have careers or had careers, have worked. You know, so it's like I feel like I don't have to say this, but I'll just say it to be really clear. God is not concerned with who cooks, cleans, and makes more money. Can we just accept that, right? Like, I know maybe we don't have to say that in Lakewood, but like the rest of the world, I mean, is struggling with this idea of the roles, and it's like, no, let's go to this passage, 1 Corinthians 12. Again, this is a passage from Paul. He's talking to the church about being the church, okay? So, but I want to relate it back to our relationships. Verse 4, there are different kinds of gifts, but the same Spirit distributes them. There are different kinds of service, but the same Lord. There are different kinds of working, but in all of them and in everyone, it is the same God at work. And it's like, so you have been given, you've been getting certain roles, you've been given certain gifts that you're just better at than the other person. Listen, Ashley is not going to mow the lawn, okay? She hates that, okay? But it was negotiated like early on, like, because I would show up when she had her own house and we were dating. I would show up with my mower, right, and I would mow her lawn when she didn't know. You know, that was just one of those things that you do when you're trying to impress someone, right? We talked about that at the end of last week's message. But, you know, there's certain roles. Here's something we didn't negotiate: laundry, okay? We didn't negotiate laundry. And there is not 5 people in our house, not one of them feels gifted or blessed in the folding of laundry, okay? And if you went down, and we have so we're on Riverside now in the parsonage, and there's this laundry room down there, and it is the size of the basement. And if you look at it, that checks out. Like, it's a mess, right? It's a disaster. Clean clothes, dirty clothes. We're not gifted in those areas. But we have to negotiate the things that we're going to do. What are you going to do? What am I going to do? You know, the simple things like that. And if it isn't negotiated, this is the point here. If it's not negotiated, if you haven't negotiated on something that you're doing as a couple, you can't complain about it. You know what I mean? Like, you can't complain about it. You haven't talked about it. You haven't negotiated it. So have a discussion. And then this last thing, and then we have a cool Bible blessing and stuff after I'm done with this. But this is something that I learned from Marriage Helper. Okay, Marriage Helper is an organization that Ashley found, and then we began being a part of it. It saved our marriage, and then we've been volunteering. We haven't volunteered the last couple years, but Ashley has, and it's been an amazing resource. And they have free resources online, and then all the way up to like expensive coaching. All right, so like there's kind of the whole thing, the whole gamut of help and assistance that you need at the Marriage Helper website. And I say that because I'm going to use their material here. So there's something called pies, all right? And what we're going to talk about is how do we, the thing that they really stressed as far as our marriages and how can we make them as strong as possible, right? Because here's what I believe, that and this is why we're going to talk about this kind of every year. Strong families make for strong churches, and strong churches make for strong communities, all right? So that's why, like, it's not a big Bible exposition that we're going through, but I believe that these concepts, these things can have us have healthier homes, which will give us a healthier church, and it'll just allow us to do better things. So these next things are about working on yourself, all right? Because the best way to improve, rising tide raises all boats, right? And so the first one of pies is P, all right? Are you taking care of your personal health, right? Your physical health, sleep, rest, exercise, right? Because listen, when you're dreaming about the future together, right? When you're sitting down and dreaming about the future, you are assuming your health in that, right? You're assuming your health in that. And so you've got to take care of it because you are not the one that is going to have to deal with the burden of your mortality, right? Like our families and our children, our spouses, like they're the ones that are dealing with that. We're dealing with that with my dad. You know, sometimes it's tough. You know, and we're dealing with those things, and you just got to make sure you're taking care of yourself, getting sleep, getting exercise. And I'm not talking about looking like LeBron James or Brad Pitt. I'm just talking about being physically healthy. You know, I'm not talking about never eating chips. You know, just not a whole bag in an hour. That's what we're talking about. All right. Except during the Super Bowl. So we have P is physical, I is intellectual. Are you growing in your intellect? And the reason this one's important is that when you are reading and whatever you're reading or listening to, because I do a lot of podcasts, audiobooks, stuff like that, it gives you something to talk about, right? If you're not growing, if you don't learn anything new, right, you're not as interesting. Right? Because you just don't know. Like so there's this idea of you learning something, and you see this a lot in families where there's a parent that stays at home, and then there's a parent maybe that's working in the workforce, right? So what happens is one tends to intellectually outgrow another one because one's handling toddlers, right? And one's dealing with adults. Like, what's the first thing you do if you stay? I was a work from home dad, and it was like when no offense, Lana, you weren't great conversationalist at 3 years old. All right, so when a parent or an adult or the mailman, right, just comes to your door, you're just like, hey, let's talk, right? Let's have a conversation. So intellect, so you want to develop it, read something, just learn something new, you know, and it just gives you something to talk about, and it makes you feel better about yourself, right? And gives you some confidence. All right, that's P-I-E, emotional. How is your emotional health? And this is the one that Ashley and I struggled with a lot because emotional health means, do people like being around you? Because here's the thing, you can be very attractive to a person. You can be very intelligent in the opinion of a person, but it doesn't matter if that emotional piece is missing. Because I see a lot of people when we deal with affairs and marriage coaching and marriage helper, and the person that stays is always like, I don't understand. I'm prettier. I have a job. They don't do this. They don't like that. It's because there's this idea of that person made me feel good. And so when we're working on our emotional health, like no one wants to come home, or no one wants to be the person who when dad or mom or somebody comes home, they got to hide. Or they're worried about, they got to let them relax. So they got to get away. They're coming home. Like, no one wants that, right? And so you've got to figure out, you got to negotiate. I heard one couple say this. They said when he comes home, he hands me the keys, and I leave. And I just, 20, 30 minutes, he just kind of plays with the kids, does whatever he can with the kids. Sometimes you're just kind of hurting them, right? And so, and then she comes back. And so there's kind of this, that's just the way they negotiated it, right? So you've just got to figure out a way to negotiate your emotional health. Listen, counseling. Go to counseling. Sometimes Ashley tells me to call mine, but sometimes I call them on my own, and so like I got a meeting on Monday, just to talk about some stuff. Because you've got to take care of your emotional health, because if your spouse doesn't want to be around you, that's hard to begin to move forward in the same direction. You tracking? All right? And the last one is S, spiritual. And the basic question is this: are you taking seriously that which you claim to believe, or are you living a double life? Right? And so it's called cognitive dissonance, where I believe one thing, but I'm living the other way. And you can do that actually for a while, until they collide, right? And as soon as they collide, you have to decide whether you're going to change your actions or change your beliefs, right? And so with your spirit, what you have to actually ask yourself when you're sitting on your bed is, am I living the way that I feel comfortable with, how do I say this? Is there something I am doing wrong that I know I am doing wrong that I would be willing to change? Let me say that again. Is there something I am doing wrong that I know I am doing wrong that I would be willing to change? Like, that is a question we should be asking ourselves on a regular basis. And it's based on your own beliefs, right? It's based on your view of the Bible. Or as far as this goes, this can work for any spiritual, this can work for atheists, because you still have a religion, right, to a degree. But you have a way of life that you believe should be lived. All of us. And are you living up to that? Because you're probably not, right? But are you moving towards it? And as you do that, you're just going to be happier, because you're going to be living your own unified life. Because cognitive dissonance means you're divided, right? And so it's all about getting back together. It's all about being one. And so here's the last thing I'll say, and then Shannon can come up. It's worth everything to get this right. It's worth everything to get this right. Matthew 6:33, this is Jesus saying, he says, "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." That means that we ought to orient our lives in such a way where the greatest good is at the top. So you've got to look at it. You've got to take the time to look at your priorities and where things are going. Listen, if the kids need to take a break from sports for one season so that you can make sure that you're getting together and you're doing the things you need, because your relationship is way better than their activity level, right? It's way more important than them going to the NBA, right? Way more. And so listen, if you're desperate for a date, roll in here at 9:50, send your kids upstairs, and just walk right back out. You think I'm joking? Come back, please. Like, you got to come back, right, Shannon? You got to come back. But listen, I'm serious. Like, it's important. It's important. And if that's what it takes, then do it. Do whatever it takes to make sure that you and your loved ones are on the same page and are moving in the same direction. So, come on up, Shannon.